saw in their opening prayer and their opening attitude the similarity between the Pilgrim and the Indian. And that's the point, is that there is a universal truth that sits in all of us. And our work is to encourage us to make contact with that. And so now Gary and Tom will offer a few words of how the insights of the Pilgrim and the Iroquois can contribute to our future.
In the year 2020, the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower in Plymouth Harbor will have taken place. The Pilgrims were products of the Puritan impulse, which was centered in Cambridge and Oxford universities in England. The intellectual and spiritual mentor of the so-called Pilgrim Way was the ironic John Robinson, who was educated in Corpus Christi College in Cambridge. Robinson was therefore steeped in the radical views of the time of the Puritan revolt against the Church of England and the state, which was anchored, and the church was anchored in the monarchy. The Puritans, generally speaking, sought the purification of the church from within while remaining a part of it. They believed that the Reformation was incomplete in England and in dangerous efforts tried to establish a furtherance of those ideas. Some among those who felt that purification within the Church of England was painfully slow and not ever likely to come to pass, opted to separate from the church and the state altogether. These groups thus became known as separatists. That meant that they were not only separating from an established state church, but they were treasonous as well. They were challenging the monarchy itself as the locus of authority in both church and state. One such group of separatists was a small band of people deeply convicted and filled with resolve, who resided in a small and obscure hamlet, or it's where they gathered, in the northern part of England named Scrooby. They were led by remarkable personages: William Brewster, William Bradford, Richard Clifton, who were joined later by their eventual pastor and mentor, John Robinson. The freely constituted church, called a congregation, met inevitably with scorn and persecution by the powers that be, so much so that the congregation opted by mutual consent to migrate to the Netherlands, where there was freedom of religion. After a year in Amsterdam and identity with a previously established English church, a church which was already embroiled in conflict and dissension, the Scrooby congregation moved to the great university city of Leiden. In Leiden, John Robinson became pastor, and Clifton, probably the pastor at Scrooby, decided to stay in Amsterdam. The question emerges regarding the eventual Pilgrim Church as to how it was to be organized. The hierarchical system of king, monarchy, bishops had already been abandoned. When then and where was the binding authority in the congregation which had freed itself of the elaborate hierarchy of England? With the landing of the Mayflower in remote Plymouth, there arrived on these shores ideas of freedom which in seedling form gave rise to a vision of governments and civil order, which was a primitive foundation eventuating in democratic self-governance. They organized around a sacred principle which they called a covenant. Everyone knows in basic terms what a covenant is, I suppose. It is a contract, a compact, through which each party agrees to abide by mutually binding terms. It is what the Pilgrim people referred to, those equally binding terms, mutual consent. What appears to be missing in our contemporary society regarding the idea of covenant is that the covenant is sacred and holy and has eternal significance. The Puritan development in England shared in the validity of covenant, but I'm concentrating on the Pilgrims. The key to unlock that vision related in the notion that there are eternal ideas, eternal ideals which transcend us and are guide to us in our attempts to approximate them in society. Having said that, I'm going to read to quote Governor Bradford's paraphrase of the covenant in Of Plymouth Plantation. In 1606, the people who were to become known as Mayflower Pilgrims formed and attempted to abide by the conditions laid out for themselves in the covenant. So many, therefore, of these professors as saw the evils of these things in these parts, and whose hearts the Lord had touched with heavenly zeal for his truth, they shook off the yoke of anti-Christian bondage. And as the Lord's free people, joined themselves by a covenant of the Lord into a church estate in the fellowship of the gospel, to walk in all his ways made known, or to be made known of them to them, according to their best endeavors, whatsoever it should cost them, the Lord assisted them. This is a simple covenant idea, but it is hardly simplistic. But it is a notion little appreciated in our backgrounds in the essence of the Pilgrim story and their contacts with the native people. It is important and even crucial for us to grasp this significance. Having declared themselves from the Church of England and the monarch at its head, groups like the Pilgrims had to establish a guiding idea, an idea which was operative in the formation of governance and a social order. The covenant provided that sacred idea. The covenant rested upon the presence of an eternal truth, something that's unchangeable and everlasting, and is a model for all governance and order in church and state. It is true, as is often repeated, in the years that the Pilgrims made their sacrificial and arduous journey, their particular expression of religious freedom, however, was with with it, carried with it the managing of their civil affairs as well. The Pilgrims, therefore, were seeking civil as well as religious freedom. The covenant idea was their sacred contact. Covenant itself was the presence of the divine, presence of that which was beyond us. That covenant guide, employed in the formation of the church in Scrooby and Leiden, became the model for the Mayflower Compact. The Compact is special in many ways, but it is perhaps most remarkable because it extends that original covenant idea into the civil and social ordering of society. This is so important to grasp because the Mayflower Compact was not only something that dealt with church members, but members of the whole Mayflower passenger list. It is not often known, pardon me, that not all the people in the Mayflower were religious. Some had signed on as passengers, servants, and so on. The patent for the Pilgrims and the Mayflower was for Virginia. When they were not in Virginia, badly off course, and when they were coming into Provincetown Harbor, there were those among them who said, "We are not in Virginia. Therefore, when we get ashore, we will do as we damn well please." That was a serious thing. The passengers were small enough in number that in order to survive, they had to employ the old covenant notion. And that was when they formed into a community based upon a compact, civil and religious. And both the civil and the religious sphere were to serve the same purpose, to reflect the transcendent ideal. The pastor, John Robinson, who I love, sent with them, with John Carver, the first governor on the Mayflower, a wonderful guide to what they should do once they arrived. Part of it was in the film, and those are the words of John Robinson. Robinson said, "Whereas you are become a body politic, using among yourselves civil government, and not furnished with any person of special eminency above the rest, to be chosen into office of government. Let your wisdom and godliness appear not only in choosing such persons as to entirely love and promote the common good, but also in a yielding unto them all due honors of obedience in their lawful administrations, not beholding in them the ordinariness of their persons, but God's ordinance for your good." This is a remarkable extension of that covenant idea that all people are bound by a sacred bond. Whenever the early pilgrims anticipated any difficulty at all, they repaired to their old covenant notion. When they settled in Plymouth and they became aware of the great sachem of the Wampanoags, Massasoit, they invited him to Plymouth. Massasoit accepted the invitation, and the discussions ended in a remarkable agreement of covenant between them. Governor Bradford records the terms of that agreement, which are these: that neither he nor any of his should injure or do harm to any of their people, that if any of his did harm to any of theirs, he should send the offender that they might punish them, that if anything were taken away from any of theirs, he should cause it to be returned, and they should do the like to his. If any unjustly war against him, they would aid him. If any did war against them, he should aid them. He should send his neighbors, confederates, to certify them of this, and not to wrong them, but might likewise be comprised of peace. This is a simple covenant, a simple compact, through which both parties agree to be common in serving the common good. For the Pilgrims, and I think for the native people, the sacred is present in the secular world by binding covenants. The agreement with the native peoples lasted for a few generations, over 50 years. And after that, with more influx of people coming, they lost that sense of the sacred bond. They didn't any longer have confidence that there were transcendent principles and ideas which govern in our common endeavors as a society. The results after that were tragic. The Pilgrims were not a perfect people, and it is of very little profit to us to romanticize them or attempt to make them into anything other than the flawed human beings they were. It is, however, to speak of them as hounds of freedom. But they were also hounds of heaven, in a sense. They believed themselves to be in the grasp of a transcendent purpose, which was to guide them in their ever so feeble human attempts to employ those ideals. As the Pilgrims were about to leave Delfshaven in their own boat, the Speedwell, following John Robinson's farewell address, their then to be future governor of Plymouth Plantation, William Bradford, concluded, and so they left that goodly and pleasant city, which had been their resting place near 12 years. But they knew they were pilgrims, and they looked not much on those things, but lift their eyes to the heavens, their dearest country, and quieted their spirits. It is assumed that from this passage, that's where the Pilgrims got their name, and maybe it did. The point here is that religious freedom, civic freedom, is anchored in a transcendent ideal, something beyond us that doesn't change. And we are best off if we ever hope to put a city set upon a hill, which comes from Matthew chapter 5. We are better off if we keep trying through human effort, stumbling as well as reaching the goal toward those things which last. There's been a secularizing tendency, and people don't think anything today, that anything transcends them. But it has been a part of the American way that we must live by ideals, that we must not lose sight of the fact that what we do should be an attempt at least to meet the ideal. I do not rue the secular process. I taught it for 8 years in Emmanuel College here across the way. But what I do understand is that we are better off if we don't just depend on our own ways to establish our way in this world. There's a verse in Proverbs that always haunts me. Where there is no vision, the people perish. Well, the Pilgrims, at least in their own little way, with their covenant, their peculiar ideas, their separatist notions, they had a vision. And vision is a real good thing if we as a society don't want to walk blindly into the future. So that's a little snippet of the Pilgrim way. Thank you.
Thank you, Gary. Now, Tom.
Am I on? Is it working? Yeah. Oh, okay. I brought with me today, this cane. And but first, before I talk about that, the Iroquois people are constituted people for 2,000 years. That Constitution came. And it's still going today. It has been attacked by monarchs. It's been attacked by Canada. It's been attacked by United States, even right till yesterday. But it's still going. It never faltered or stopped. We came close to going over the Niagara Falls in terms of extinction, but we always were able to turn that around and never go over to be extinct. Amongst, I'm not sure why, but amongst the Iroquois, they are, I think it's because they were constituted, have managed to hold on to things. And all the ceremonies we have, from the New Year's ceremony, and our New Year's lasts 8 days, 8 consecutive days, one after another, to do a New Year's. And it's not done on January 1st. It's gone by the constellation of stars and the moon, and that's how we measure that. Onondaga's New Year's is 21 days. but they have 1 week rest in between. That's why it's 21. But the Constitution itself is, it takes roughly 10 to 12 days to recite it. And it is not written on paper. It is not anywhere like the text he has or book, not like that. It's done mostly all from memory. And these 10 to 12 days is 5-hour days with no coffee break. They start usually around 9 in the morning and they'll finish around 1 for 12 days to recite the law. But it's not just the Constitution, because they consider the time before it was necessary to have a Constitution, the circumstances of our history at the time made it reasons to have a Constitution for peace. So they tell about how it was before there was peace, and then why it's important that peace should be embraced. And then it goes on for the future, and you've seen it in this movie. By the way, it's a good movie for young people to watch it. I think very good. It says that in the future, what we do as leaders of this Constitution is that whatever decision we make today, that we have to realize, no matter how big the decision or how little the decision, that decision that our leaders makes today as well as ours is going to affect 7 generations into the future. So whatever we decide today, it's going to be good or it's going to be bad for our great-great-great-great-grandchildren. And that's the preamble to the Constitution, you see. But I want to first talk about this cane. This cane is what they call a condolence cane. And you see these things on here. I don't know if you can see it good, but after this is over, I'll have it on the table here, and you can look at it close in detail if you want to. But this first group of leader here is 9 of them. They're Mohawks. Each peg represents a different office. And this is 2,000 years old. The next group is the Oneidas, the nation of the Oneidas. They have 9 leaders, and each is an office of the nation of the Oneida. This one here in the middle is the smallest nation. They are the Onondagas. And they have 14 leaders, way more than the Mohawks or anybody else. And they're the smallest nation. And there is a reasoning behind that. Even though they're the smallest, they get the most leaders. Because there is a compromisation that has to happen if you want peace. If you want a good marriage, you got to have compromisation. If you want to raise good kids, you got to have a compromisation. You cannot be a king, a queen, or a dictator. You've got to include all in the decisions. And that's what this Constitution, and that's what he was talking about, those Puritans. I think that's what they were looking for, right? That everybody has a say. That's really good. So now the next one, and also this Onondagas are the seat capital of the Iroquois Confederacy. That's where all big decisions are made. Like Albany is to New York State, like Washington, D.C. is to the United States. That's what Onondaga is to the Iroquois. And then this next one here is the Cayugas, and they have 10 offices or 10 leaderships. And then the last one is the Seneca. And they're a big nation, almost as big as the Mohawks, but almost as big. And they have 8 leaders. And so altogether, there are 50 leaders in this confederacy. Some people ask me in the United States as I travel Canada, how come you say you're Iroquois, and then sometime you say you're a Mohawk? It confuses them because they don't know the history. Well, the same thing with a New Yorker. Sometimes he tells people from France he's an American, and then the next day he tells them he's a New Yorker or a Californian, and then sometimes he says he's an American. Well, the same thing with a Mohawk. We're always Mohawks, but we belong to this confederacy called the Iroquois, and that's how it goes. So when this cane is facing east to west, it starts with the Mohawk. And so whenever you do a protocol in native country and amongst elders, you got to watch when you recall or do a, what do you call it? Is that right, the word? Roll call. Recall. My English gets mixed up sometimes. But anyway, when you do a roll call of the Iroquois, you always start where the sun comes up, because that never changes. And geographically, as it goes, it shines on the Mohawks. That's why it starts there. Then as it goes west, the sun, it hits the Oneidas. And as it goes further west to Syracuse area, it hits the Onondagas, Cayuga, Seneca. And that's, so whenever somebody asks you to name the Iroquois people, you always do it that way. Don't say Senecas first, because those old people will say you're going contrary to the sun. You're going contrary to the nature. See? And also, that also goes to this. Did you know, farmer, when they put a fence post in the ground? In the Iroquois country, a Seneca Mohawk, if you put that fence post in the ground and small part, you put it in first, and the big part is on the top of the ground, they'll make you take it out of the ground. And they'll say, don't do that. That's against the Creator. That's against nature. Take that post out. Turn it back over where the roots is supposed to be and put that in the ground and let the small on top. As to still we do that. A lot of Iroquois do that. That's because they still follow the original truth in everything. And another thing I want to share with you is when we make medicine, somebody's sick, and we use herbs from the swamp or from the mountains or the whatever, and then you have to use water to boil the water for the medicine. And our grandma and my mother, when we go there, you go to the river and you're going to go get water to make medicine. So the water's going that way. So you don't use your dipper or your pail and go this way, because the water's going that way. So you don't want to attack the way the water's going. So you take your pail or your cup and you go with the water like this. That way the power and the intent of creation to the power of that water is in its fullest form. So that way when it's boiled to make medicine for the sick, its fullest power is there. So it's in all aspects of what we do. It's not just now and then. It's everything. But anyway, and so when this is faced east to west, we call it the people of the Great Longhouse. And the roof of our longhouse is the sky, and the floor of our longhouse is the Mother Earth. And the door in the east is where the sun comes, and the door in the west is where the sun goes down. So my uncle and grandpa and grandma said, big longhouse we got. It's all symbolic, you see. It's great. And so when this is put upwards like this, it's turned into the great tree of peace. And so these leaders sticking out here and there on this are like the branches of the great white pine tree. They're the ones that give energy to the whole purpose or the ideal of this Constitution. That's their job, is to bring nourishment, water, food, power of spiritual, and to make this strong, not to fall. And at the top of here is the eagle. It was placed there by the Constitution of our Creator when 2,000 years ago. because the eagle is the leader of all the different groups of birds that fly in the world for Iroquois. That's what our Creator told us. And so the eagle flies the highest of any bird. They can't go that high as the eagle. And this eagle from a mile up can see a mouse. That's how good their eyes is. And that's why this eagle can see the most of creation in one place than any other living thing. And that's why he was placed on top of the tree of peace to watch from far away anything crawling too close to here that'll destroy the roots and make this tree to fall. That eagle will scream and let us know. That's why eagle was chosen. And by the way, I don't know how true this is, but you might research it and find out if it is true, or is it a what do you call those children's story? Fairy tales. Yeah, that's what I meant. It's because my uncle and grandpa and grandma told me that when my great grandfather, it's like her great grandfather's picture here. I have a picture of my great grandfather too in that bag over there. He was invited in 1754 at the Albany meeting with Benjamin and Thomas Jefferson, and they were reciting that great law that takes 10 days about how do you make leaders, what are the principles, guiding principles of those leaders, and how do nations react to other nations in their relationships. They were asked to tell that to Benjamin and Thomas at the Albany meeting in 1754, and I have a picture in that bag of it. It's a drawing of artist. And that's when Benjamin and Thomas, shortly after that, start to make the Constitution for the United States of America. And what I'm telling you is that time, George Washington asked our leaders if he can borrow, because they were going to use a turkey as the bird of the Americas. But George Washington asked our chiefs, can we use the eagle that you use on top of that tree for our emblem? And the Iroquois said, you can borrow it until you get on your feet, and they'll give it back. We've been waiting since that time. And they didn't give it back yet. But I just want to put that in there for research purpose to see is there any validity to that, or is that just my grandpa and grandma telling a story? I think it's true though. But anyway, this whole Constitution, guess what? Is initiated by women. Because we are a matrilineal society. And so we have clans. I belong to the Bear clan. My father belonged to Turtle clan. And those two clans of a bear and a bear cannot marry. It's considered incest. And anybody who is a product of incest can never become a leader of a nation. Because they need to have full health, full minds. And if you're incest, there can be an obstruction of your being. And you can't lead a nation under that circumstance. There's too many kids involved. So it's a forbidden. And if you're going to be a leader, these women will gather everybody that belongs to their political party or their clan. And I'm just saying political party because of the, that's what you can relate to of this group of political group. It's a Bear clan. And so those women who are the leaders of that political party only discuss the Bear clans and the political party that everybody belongs to that. Turtle's got no business in there. Wolf's got no business in there. And nobody else, just those bears. So that woman will call the meeting. When this leader gets old and looks like he's 100 years old and he could leave tomorrow, you've got to be ready to put another in. And that's what this cane is used for. It's called condolence. So you condole the dead family, and then after you condole them, then you have to raise a new one. And now you can dance and you have celebration because you have raised now a new one. So it's that woman who has to gather that political people in order to get a new leader. And she will recommend which men are going to be possibilities. And other elders of her family can also recommend different people that might qualify to be a leader. Now here are the qualifications that they're going to look for. One, this man has to be married. Cannot be single. This Constitution said he has to be married to the woman from another clan, and they have to have 3 children. They cannot become leader if they don't have any children. And minimally 3. And one time I asked my grandma, why is it 3 kids? And even my grandmother told me that when I got married and I'm going to be father, you have to have at least three kids. And they tell us that all the time. And I asked her why. She says all Iroquois in our belief system, it was told that 3 kids, minimally, that means you can have 10 if you want, but minimally you got to have 3. The first child born is going to replace the mother. The second child born is going to replace the father. And the third child born, if something should happen to one of the 2, that one is take place. And that's why we had 3. And also at the beginning of the world, when humans were first created from the other planet's power and the energy of this planet to make us, the humans, they put us in a fire. And they took us out of the fire, and then they opened our mouth, the creation, the creative powers. And they blew in there 3 times. And after the 3rd breath, Grandma and Grandpa said, the eyes began to blink of those dolls made out of the water and the dirt and the different elements of the nature from where we come. And then their arms began to move. And then their legs began to move. And so the Creator put that man right here, and He put that woman right there. And He said, now shoulder to shoulder, you're going to walk the Mother Earth. And you're going to love each other. And you're going to have respect for each other. And I give you all the thinking in your head, the way I want you to be and behave as you walk this earth. And that one, remember a while ago when I opened up, that was the Reader's Digest form, is what He put in their heads. This will be your guidance to how you shall relate to everything on this planet. And if you follow that whole thing, this will be a really respectful, perfect world. And that's the thing that we got to deal with in the future. How do we do that? Well, then the next thing in this Constitution, it says that any man who has fought in any kind of fight, war, and if you have killed somebody through the war, that disqualifies you, if you have blood on your hand, to become one of these leaders. No blood on your hand. It's got to be a man of peace from his birth all the way. And he had been married to three kids. So that, and I asked Grandma why they say you got to be married. Because if you're married to the woman, you'll become intimate with her. And you stick together, everything, no matter what happens. Earthquake, you're still together. That means you learned what's love about now. And leaders has to know love thoroughly. And then when you have 3 children, you're guaranteed now to know how to love. Because when them 3 kids come, or 4 kids, or 5, now you really know what love is. Because when you become this leader, now you're not only going to have 1 or 10 kids, you're going to have thousands of kids from your nation that you're going to be the father of. And you've got to know how to love. And that's the same thing with the woman. that does the initiation of this whole procedure, she has to follow the same rule. And it says also in there that every man and woman that's going to become a leader in this whole constitution has to have a good mind. That means a good mind. That means that if I'm someplace over there, I can't tell you, oh, this is no good. But at her face, I'm good to her. That means no gossip, no rumors, no, what do you call it in English now? Character assassinations. I'm not supposed to say that. But these new leaders, they would have never made it in Iroquois. They would have been both disqualified right at the get-go. But anyways, but this is how strict that law is in terms of the safety net for our future. They really want to make sure that the kids are going to be thought about, see. And then, and so that means that, so if you say anything, gee, I like your necklace, that is so nice. It makes you look handsome even. That's good mind. When you see somebody walking and they look a little bit lonesome or lonely, and you say, my God, I thought it was a rose coming down the street. And then they laugh because you make them feel good. That's a good mind. You don't throw negatives in your conversations with each others. You always pull the sun down from the sky. Make their heart happy. That's what a leader does. Even the little kid, you see them. A real leader goes over there and he hugs them or pats them on the back and praises the heck out of them. And then they feel so good. And that's what our leaders has to do. That's what this Constitution says. And so on. And then it says also a leader has to have, according to this Constitution, 7 spans thick skin. And I asked my uncle one time, what do you mean 7 spans thick skin? He said, did you ever take a deer skin and when you got a fresh deer, you just hunt and you take the hair off and you take all the meat stuff off and you let it dry, it turns into this hard skin. And if you try to put your finger like this, you'll break your finger. That's how hard that skin gets, dried. He said, well, you take 7 of those deer hide that's dried, and that's how much the skin of a leader has to be. So that, because as a leader of a nation, you can never satisfy everybody, although that's the goal, but you can't never really do that. And so sometime you make a decision, and somebody got angry because that decision didn't like it. And so now they start getting darts. This is symbolic. Darts with words. And they throw it at that leader to pierce his heart because they didn't like the decision he made. But even if somebody did that to that chief, he has 7 spans thick skin, so that sharp word can't go through to pierce his heart. So if she's mad because of the decision he made, and she's throwing darts at him, well, today it's too fresh. So he knows he can't do nothing right now, and so he'll step back. That's what this law says. Until tomorrow or next week when she melted, when she's not so defensive, when she don't have her dukes up. And then he'll go over there and he'll say, my niece, 2 weeks ago we made a decision and I know you didn't like it, but I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because it's the betterment of all the people. And I want to apologize because you didn't think it was good enough. And so if you accept my apology, and I'll try to do it better next time so that it won't hurt you anymore. And then she usually cry and he cry, and they make friends. That's what leaders do. That's the old time law. And that's our job, is to put those kind of leaders back in again for all the nations and even the Puritans. Put those kind in, human law. So when you have covenants, they are, and when they made treaties and covenants, the Iroquois and the other nation, with the European. They said, as long as the sun shines, this covenant will be for sure the truth and will be respected. As long as the water runs in the rivers, this covenant will always be as long as water runs. This covenant will be lasting and good between us as long as the grasses keep on growing. And those grass and that rivers and all that stuff is the Creator's eyes. That's why you say, I pledge this covenant. And everybody that belongs to those nations stand for that. And there will be peace. But when one doesn't follow it, that's when it breaks. That's when people get hurt. So this law is still going. The women still do it. And but it needs another night. Like I said, it takes 10 days to recite this. 5 hours per day, 12 days even, I think. Last time they did it 10 days, they said we need a couple more days. And the Iroquois are still doing it to this day, no matter what happened, no matter how much colonial steamrollers came to make us extinct and say not to do it. All my old ladies and old men of my grandma and grandpa said, nope. Creator told us we do this, and we do it. And so we're still doing it. And our language is still pretty strong in the Iroquois, especially Mohawks. They've got hundreds and hundreds of them speaks yet, even our kids. And one time, one of our elders was gone. And he was gone somewhere, one of them, and the other one was too, and another one was too. And so somebody had died. And they were all gone far away, the ones that usually home. And so that one young guy, he was only about 17 years old. He stepped up and he says, I'm sitting with my leaders, but they're gone away. And he says that there now is a need for helping out. He says, I can do it for you. So he stood up. He's only 17. And he buried those people. Did all the ceremony in the sacred land house. Took them right to the grave and put the ground on it. And did all the words and ritual goes with it. And the whole nation would cry for him. Because you see. So it's not going to die. No matter what happens. Until the sun stops shining and the river don't run no more, then we're all done too. But as long as that water is going and that sun is shining, we're here to stay. So, but can I have one last note? I can't tell you the whole vision, but I do want you to know it. It's, 3 years ago, I had a vision come to my sleep. Woke me right up. And it was a black void, a powerful thing. It talked to me in Mohawk. It says, hurry up and go to the meeting. So I went, and I was going to say no, but by the time I got enough courage to say no to this spiritual power, we were already at this place in Onondaga. And there was a big circle, and people had blankets on, like old time, in a big, big circle. All the people I ever knew since I was born. And some was just blanket on the ground, nobody wrapped with it. And I says, what's that? I asked him. He says, oh, those are your old chiefs that are dead. The ones you used to see in council. Just their blanket is left. And then I looked another place. He says, there you are sitting. Did you see yourself? You got blanket on? He says, not too long, but not tomorrow. Your blanket will be just on the ground and you won't be in there anymore. Well, he told me. This scared me because I know that's the way it goes. I'm not afraid. And so then finally, here's what he said. Pretty soon, not too long, I want you to know that 50 to 60 years ago, your generation, when you were a young boy, the Iroquois, like all other nations, was ready to become extinct with their language, with their ceremony, and this and that. And the Iroquois was going to do it too. He says, that's 60 to 70 years ago. Nobody wants to be Indian anymore. But he said, I came, and I came to you, and I touched you. And I went over to the men, and I touched them. And he went to another man's in Seneca, and he touched it like this. And I put the power in use, and I put the idea in use, what to do next. There was no meeting to make a plan or a design. How are we going to not be extinct? It was me, but you don't know that. And he says, you know, in this last 50 years, you guys, Toja Dalage, he says, Toja Dalage, that means you're included in that group that I touched. He says, and you were able, that big ship with the people in there ready to go over the Niagara Falls, one more 6 inches and you're going to be gone forever. But you guys, in the last 50, 60 years, you managed to turn the boat around and go back up the river so you don't go over the big falls, Niagara Falls. And you did a damn good job, he said. And I'm proud. And he said, whenever you go to a meeting and all our people are there, you and those that are left that didn't die, I want you to tell them how proud I am of them, what they have been able to do. You were great leaders, because you were almost done, but you built that fire back up. And then he says, the last one I'm going to tell you. He says, but not too long in the future, again, not tomorrow, but all those blankets that you see wrapped on those people and sitting on the ground in that big circle, there will be no people in those blankets, and every blanket will be on the ground. But when our babies are going to be born, they will be born under that blanket. And as they're born and come up, that blanket will fall on their shoulder, those men and women. And I am going to give them kids, when they start to come being born under that blanket, 7 times the power that I gave you old guys. They're going to have 7 times the power. And if you want to see the Mohawk Nation rise, and if you want to see all the fires of nations of the world rise for the right reason, you will see that when they are born. They are going to do things that's going to be miraculous. And so to all the young people, I can't wait. I can't wait to be proud of you. And you will change this world, and you will save this world, and you will put it back to the original truths that it was meant to be. And that's all I'm going to say today. Thank you. And I hope I talk loud, you don't get mad. I just want to make sure you hear every word. Yahweh, thank you.
Oh. Wow, what wonderful insights we've gotten from the past to the present and to the future.